After spending last week at Yarberry Campground in Lenoir City here right outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, we traveled just a few miles down the road, I think it was about 8 miles, to experience Melton Hill Dam. Just like Yarberry, Melton Hill Dam is a Vista recreation campground, which was previously known as CampRRM. This is the third of their campgrounds that we have stayed at. About a year ago, we stayed at Loyston Point on Norris Lake, which is probably my favorite lakefront campground around Knoxville. Then we stayed at Yarberry last weekend, which our site wasn't waterfront, but other than that, it was a really nice campground. They did have quite a few seasonal sites, but they were all clean. Well, I've been pleased with all our stays at these campgrounds, but I will say that Melton Hill Dam is probably going to have the most issues I've seen out of all these Vista recreation campgrounds so far. Number one, it was pretty hard to find. I put it in MapQuest, couldn't come up with the address on there. Then I put it in Google Maps. I actually pulled up 3 different addresses all over Knoxville. Also, once we got here, there weren't a lot of signs saying that it was the campground. There was a lot of signs saying the dam or to the shipping receiving area, but not for the campground. Granted, in their defense, I did come in the wrong way. And if you come in the way that they have on their directions, there are a few signs pointing to the campground. I did end up finding it in Google Maps because I found right where the dam was here and I figured it was close by. So I did use that in Google Maps to come here. However, I didn't use the directions that they said, like I already said, so it took me down this road, Buttermilk Road, and then down some back ways that are kind of sketch. So it's a lot easier if you use the directions that are right there on their website, which basically says to take 95 from Interstate 40 over. That road also continues down to 75, but it's a different number down there. But they do have the exit numbers and everything for you right on the website. If you come in the way that they want you to, it's going to be more of a flat, wide open area that you're coming in, where if you come in the back way, you're going to have a lot of trees, a lot of curves, a lot of stuff like that, that you would really probably rather not go through. However, once you get into the campground, the confusion isn't quite over yet, because you pull up to this billboard, it's got signs on it saying that you have to stop and check in, but it gets a little confusing because right past there's a split and it goes left and goes right. There is a building straight down on the left, which is the office, but it's not clear from where you're sitting there with your rig and stuff, and I know you're a little hesitant to just pull out and start driving with a 30-foot camper behind you. There are signs in front of the office there, which is the big gray building, that says you can park there to check in, but the road isn't very wide, so you just need to know that ahead of time. This is where you want to go though. If you turn right, you'll be going straight up into the campground and bypassing the office. I will say that the staff here have been very nice and helpful during our check-in process. The next issue that's pretty evident early on with this campground is it's built on the side of a mountain. Now, building a campground on the side of a mountain has inherent issues. In order to get to your site, there will be some maneuvering involved. I was told to drive past the campground office and turn around in a small parking lot there, which is actually the beach parking, which my 30-foot fifth wheel had just barely enough room to clear the turn. Then I had to go up into the campground, and it was obvious that a lot of people drag their tail going up the road to get up the loops in the campground. Now, some general information about this campground is that the campground has 61 sites. 9 of those sites are full hookup, but it's important to note that 4 of these 9 sites are handicap sites. It is obviously an older park, which there's nothing wrong with, but a lot of older parks are made for shorter campers. But there are some sites that can accommodate larger rigs, but they are few and far between. Most of the sites are going to be the best with campers under 25 feet, to be honest. There are a lot of nice sites, but remember, this campground is literally on the side of a mountain. 15 sites are primitive tent sites as well. The tent sites are the closest to the water and swimming areas. The rest of the sites are RV sites with water and electric only. There is a dump station on the way out of the campground right between the campground entrance and the turn to go to the boat ramp for those that don't have sewer hookups. Now let's talk about cellular speeds. Cell speeds were all over the place and usually on the slower side because of the mountainous terrain around here. I will run a speed test with Verizon, but I've not done that yet. But I'm going to do that, and I'm going to put the results of that right here. But I have to wait on my wifey to get here with her Verizon phone because I don't have one anymore. Now, as far as AT&T FirstNet, I ran various speed tests from just my phone without using the Instant Connect, and the network was pretty slow. I was getting about 10.56 download, and that was one of the best results that I've had. Now the Instant Connect did get a little bit better signal, but to be honest, it wasn't that much better until I went into the system and manually locked onto another band with the router. This got my speed increased to about 49 download, as the tower and band that the system wanted to connect to wasn't the best for the area here. That's one of the things that I love about the Instant Connect is you can change what tower and band that you're hooked up to. You can swap over to a different one if you're not getting very far with that. Now, as far as the amenities around here, there are 2 bathhouses, which are basic bathhouses. They're clean. They're not climate controlled. There's also a really large boat ramp here in case you plan on bringing some water toys with you. The beach is rather large with a nice little sandy area for the kids to play. There's also some steps that gradually go down in the water. It's very nice, but it is important to note that the walk down from the camping area is quite a bit of elevation loss unless you do the hack that we've been doing, that's just parking at the boat ramp. The swimming area is further away from the camping areas than I thought it was before I came here to myself and kind of viewed it. I knew that there was an incline, but I didn't appreciate how much of an elevation difference that there was between the campground and the beach. There is the campground office and a pavilion as well as a basketball court between the beach area and the camping area. Now, what are some negative aspects of the campground? The biggest negative aspect of the campground is the slope. It's just a continuous issue throughout most of the campground here. There's only a few sites that it doesn't really affect all that much. As far as the sites that I would highly recommend, which are on another level than any other areas around here, are sites 56 and 57. These 2 sites are large and flat. They're also about as close to the beach as any of the sites in the entire campground. Next, I would recommend a few sites from the lower loop in the front area that are going to be in the full hookup area, but a lot of these are handicapped sites. The ones on the front side of the road have a little bit more room. For the most part, they are nicer sites and larger. The better ones of these that I would say would be site 7, which is where we were. I will say that the angle seemed a little weird when I backed in, but it really wasn't as bad as it looked, and it wasn't a harsh angle at all. It was just a very slight angle. It's just kind of a visual thing. Also, site 3 was a really nice site. After these, I would recommend the sites on the hill going up into the campground from the beach, which would be sites 26 through 28. These are on a hill that probably complicates getting into the site, but they are pretty large and fairly flat. They're also offset behind each other just enough where you have a little bit of privacy. The next site that I'm going to recommend would be site 29. Site 29 is a huge site that's technically a pull-through site, but take that with a grain of salt because it's on the side of a pretty steep hill. The pull-through area is really sharp and inclined, but it's going to be good for parking your vehicles, but not to pull your camper through, I don't think. Now, the slope around the road where you pull in here is a little bit more severe, and there's an intersection right past there, which could complicate you getting into the site. So if you have a hard time backing your rig, I would probably still avoid that one. Next up, I would pick site 2. In this campground, there are a lot of sites that are just set up to pull over on the side of the road. The majority of these are going to be on the back half of that first loop when you come in the campground, but a lot of these are very tight. This one just has a little bit more space here in site 2 where you can pull over. I think you'd be okay with a slide or two. Next, I would pick site 45, then site 31. Then there's site 43, which would probably be one of the best sites in the park, but it was set up wrong. It's designed to be a pull-in site. So it would be great if you had a motorhome or a camper van or something like that where you could actually just pull in. The camper that's there right now, the truck is actually still in front of their camper where they just had to disconnect and leave their truck there. If you pull in that site, you're going to be having the lake in your front yard, just a good view and stuff. If you back in, you're going to be having your neighbor's backside against you. So it's just not that great unless you can pull through. If you don't mind the pull over on the road type sites, I would go for site 25 as it's off to itself. It has a lot of privacy, but for being on the side of the road, that's taken with a grain of salt, right? I will say that the picnic area and fire ring is kind of elevated above the campsite, so it's up about 10 steps, and then there's some little bit more elevation after the steps that you have to go up to get there. Now, since this campground is very small rig friendly, I'm going to do some specific sites that would be good for small rigs, and these would be sites 30, 13, 32, 34, 39, and 36. Now, if you're going to get a waterfront tent site, in my opinion, the better ones are going to be 49 through 51. They seem to have more middle of the day shade, but other than that, they're all about equal. The ones closest to the beach area seem to be a little bit further back from the water though. Now let's talk about some sites to avoid. Obviously, be careful about your rig size when selecting any of these sites. The ones that may show to fit larger rigs that I would be concerned about would be the back half of the first loop. There isn't a lot of space. One camper actually had fold-out stairs that kind of edged inside the road, and that's just kind of a hairy situation sometimes. Most of these sites aren't wide enough to accommodate a slide on your camper, at least that goes on the side that you're going to be at on the road. But there was one camper here that had a small slide on both sides, and they were able to make it work. Now, the tables and such on those sites, on the back half, on those pullover sites, they are on a different area of incline, either down or up, depending on which side of the road you're on as well. So guys, thanks for following us on our adventure this week. Be sure to stay tuned for next week's adventure, and I want to just personally thank you for your support.
Do not forget to hit that subscribe button.